I can't wait to eat that delicious produce from the grocery store, said no one ever. Okay, so grocery store produce doesn't taste all that good, but at least it's affordable. Okay, so grocery store produce is both bland and expensive, but what can you do? You have to eat something, and it's not like you can grow all the produce you need to survive all winter. Or can you? On today's video, I am going to share 10 cold-hardy survival crops that you really can grow out in your garden all winter, even in cold climates. These crops are not just super cold-hardy, but they are rich in calories, vitamins, and minerals, so you truly can have a survival garden that not only tastes better than the stuff you get in grocery stores, but you will save a ton of money, and it's just nice to know that it's there in case SHTF. If you know, you know.
If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and check out my Amazon store and Spreadshop links in the video description for everything I use in my garden and awesome custom apparel and gear.
All of the crops featured in this video can survive deep freezes and can be grown all winter long in many zones, providing you with fresh produce, self-sufficiency, and keeping you less reliant on grocery stores while saving you a lot of money. And while all of the crops mentioned in this video are very cold hardy, they will all perform a lot better if you build one of these little hoop house structures and give them a little bit of protection to keep the hard frosts and freezes off of them. They will tolerate much colder temperatures if you do so. You can easily build one of these hoop structures in about 30 minutes for a novice for about $40 to $50. If you are curious how to build one of these, I will place a link above that will show you exactly how to do so, and also I'll place some links down in the video description with agricultural fabric covers to protect them against frost if you don't know where to get those covers. Survival crop number 1 to grow in your garden all winter long are carrots. Carrots are one of the easiest and most cold-hardy things that you can grow out in your garden, tolerating cold to 0 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. But carrots' nutrient profile is also extremely impressive, boasting 40 calories per 100 gram serving and also being rich in vitamin A and potassium. This makes carrots a great thing to rely on and survive on because it not only gives you vitamins and minerals, but it gives you a fair amount of calories per serving for energy as well. I sowed these carrots in my raised garden bed about 3 weeks ago, and that is how far along they are already. Incredible germination, and they are just about ready to be thinned. This is truly one of the easiest things that you can grow in your winter garden. Survival crop number 2 to grow out in your garden all winter long just may be the king of the winter vegetables for survival, and that is parsnips. Parsnips are very similar to carrots in terms of cold hardiness, also surviving temperatures down to 0 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, and they are just as easy to grow and basically planted the exact same way. However, their nutrient profile makes them even more valuable because they contain a whopping 75 calories per 100 gram serving, which is nearly double the amount of calories per serving as carrots. So these are truly exceptional if you need calories to get you through a long winter. They are also very rich in vitamin C, potassium, iron, and calcium, having even more micronutrients than carrots. So for that reason, I am growing parsnips for the first time ever this year because I have seen so many great things about them, and I am really looking forward to it. I think this is a great low-maintenance, cold-hardy crop that I could use as a reliable staple crop to give me energy and nutrients throughout the winter. Survival crop number 3 that you can plant out in your garden all winter is another cold-hardy root vegetable, the turnip. Turnips are very impressive. They can survive cold down to 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit, and their nutrient profile has 25 calories per 100 gram serving while being rich in vitamin C, calcium, and potassium, making this an easy-to-grow, cold-hardy, long-storing, nutrient powerhouse. This is another thing that I have never grown out in my garden before because turnips are just not something that I have eaten very often throughout my life, but I'm going to make it a point to because these are a great way to have a healthier, more nutritious diet and also grow more of your own food year-round because they are so easy to grow and they are so good for you. Plus, they are pretty good when roasted. Survival crop number 4 is probably my favorite winter root vegetable, and that is beets. Why do I love beets so much? Because they are so insanely sweet when grown throughout the winter. When they get frosted on and they get kissed by the cold, they develop a lot of sugars. And winter-grown beets just may be the sweetest thing that comes out of my garden since tomato season. They are just absolutely incredible. Plus, they are, generally speaking, very easy to grow. They have a cold tolerance of about 20 degrees Fahrenheit and a very impressive nutrient profile. A 100-gram serving contains about 45 calories, and they are rich in protein, vitamin C, iron, and potassium. You often don't think of vegetables as being rich in protein, but beets are actually 15% protein per calorie, so they are actually a pretty decent source. You would have to eat quite a bit of beets to accumulate a large amount of protein in your diet, but it is nice to know that the protein is there in a pretty generous proportion for a vegetable. Survival crop number 5 is probably the fastest growing root vegetable, and that are radishes. Radishes will be ready for you for harvest about 4 weeks from the day you sow that seed for most varieties, except for some of the specialty varieties that get very large. That's one of the cool things about radishes. Even if you don't like the regular old table radishes, there are lots of cool, larger, funny looking, interesting looking, great tasting radishes out there that have different taste profiles. So they may take a little bit longer to grow, but there is something out there for everybody. Radishes are very cold hardy. They can take cold down to about 20 degrees Fahrenheit before it's really an issue. And they have a great nutrient profile. A 100-gram serving of radishes contains about 16 calories, and they are rich in vitamin C, potassium, iron, and calcium. So consider growing radishes, especially if you live at a higher latitude where your days are really short. Maybe you don't get enough sun energy to grow a longer season beet or a rutabaga that takes a longer time to grow. Radishes will grow in areas with short days. I'm looking at you, Seattle. I'm looking at you, folks in Michigan, in New England that has pretty short days throughout the winter. You can actually grow radishes as long as you keep their temperatures above 20 degrees Fahrenheit. If it gets colder than that, like I said, cover them with the hoop house. Survival crop number 6 is a new addition into my garden this year, and that is rutabagas. I have not only never grown a rutabaga before, I've never tasted one either. But I hear that they are basically like a cross between a carrot and a potato. They are starchier than a carrot, but they are sweeter than a potato. So if you blend the two together, you get a rutabaga, basically. And these are supposed to be excellent baked, roasted, in wedges, in quarters, in soups, in stews, so I'm really looking forward to growing these. These are extremely cold hardy. They can tolerate temperatures down to 20 degrees Fahrenheit. However, I have heard of rutabagas dying all the way back below the soil line to temperatures below 0 and then regrowing in the spring. So while they may not be harvestable, they can survive really severe cold. They also have an impressive nutrient profile. A 100-gram serving contains 36 calories, and they are rich in vitamin C, potassium, calcium, and iron. Survival crop number 7 is kale. When I was growing up, kale is something that you didn't even see in the grocery stores. Nobody had ever eaten it, but now there are 5-6 different kinds of kale that you can find at any generic grocery store, and for good reason. They have taken on so much popularity because kales are delicious. They have an extremely impressive nutrient profile, yielding about 30 calories per 100-gram serving, and they are rich in protein, vitamin A, vitamin C, iron, calcium, and potassium. And yes, I said protein. Believe it or not, kale is 22% protein per calorie. Now, you'd have to eat a pillowcase full of it for it to add up to a significant amount, but again, in terms of macros, that is very impressive. But what really sets kale apart is its absurd cold hardiness. 0 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, cold tolerance, uncovered. Sometimes they can survive even colder temperatures, and the most cold hardy varieties may even be able to take temperatures below 0. One of the most popular varieties of kale out there is lacinato, sometimes called dino kale, and that is what you see right here. This is a really delicious, tender kale, especially when young, but I will say it is one of the least cold hardy. It's hardy down to about zone 7, zone 8, somewhere on that borderline. I can grow it all winter here, but if you live in a colder zone, this probably won't be one of the kales for you. It also tends to be, in my experience, less tolerant of pests. This is the one that the worms go after the most, so it's why it's my only survivor that made it through my brutally hot, buggy summers. My favorite variety of kale to grow is what you see right here, dwarf blue curly kale. It is much more cold tolerant than the lacinato, and it does fantastic here all winter long. I also find that the curly leaves are much more insect resistant, so it is ideal for my climate and can tolerate temperatures much colder than the lacinato. However, the most cold hardy of the known kales are the Russian kales, white Russian kale and red Russian kale. I have never grown white Russian, but I have grown red Russian, and this is the stuff that you want to grow if temperatures of 0 and below is what you deal with. This is the hardiest stuff I have ever seen. I've never seen this take any kind of damage. We've gotten as cold down to 8 degrees Fahrenheit in a 100-year event here, and that does nothing to the red Russian kale. I planted no red Russian kale last year. I let a couple of volunteer plants come up, and they self-seeded, and they are growing all throughout my garden. So I'm going to have more red Russian kale than I know what to do with this year. This is the toughest of the kales if you deal with cold. Survival crop number 8 is even more cold hardy than kale. That is collard greens. If you've never had collards before, collards are kind of like kale, but they have a little bit more flavor. Whereas kale is very sweet and mild, collard greens are a little bit more bitter and earthy, and they are thicker and more substantial. So these are fantastic for frying with garlic and olive oil and red pepper, or with some pancetta, or for using in all-purpose soups and stews. Truly a treat. Now, most collards are going to be cold hardy to 0 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. However, just like with your kales, if you get yourself a variety that was specifically bred for winter cold, you may be able to flirt with that 0 degree or slightly below temperature for a brief period of time. Collards are extremely nutrient dense. A 100-gram serving contains 30 calories, and it is rich in protein, vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, and potassium. Collards contain a whopping 27% protein per calorie, even more protein rich than kale. Again, you will have to eat a lot of it for the number of grams of protein to add up, but again, very impressive nutrient profile. Survival crop number 9 to grow in your garden all winter long are leeks. Out of everything that I've mentioned on this list, leeks are probably the most cold hardy, provided you get yourself a variety that was bred for winter cold. An all-purpose leek like this King Richard right here can survive temperatures down to about 0 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, so this is a great all-purpose leek to grow year-round for zone 7 or warmer. But if you live in a colder zone, get yourself a winter hardy standing leek, something bred for the cold, like Blue Soleils, Oslo, Bandit. These leeks can survive temperatures well below 0, and they can basically exist in snowpack indefinitely, allowing you to leisurely come out and harvest them whenever you want. Because leeks are an allium, they are closely related to an onion, they have a high amount of sugar content, so they contain a whopping 60 calories per 100-gram serving, while also being rich in vitamin A, vitamin C, iron, calcium, and potassium. So this is one of those things that is absolutely a great survival crop that everybody should be growing, not just throughout the winter, but 365 days a year. And survival crop number 10 to grow out in your garden all winter long are your red leaf lettuces. Now, lettuce I reserve for the end of this list because it may be one of the most challenging to grow, and that is because there is so much diversity that falls underneath the term lettuce. There are lettuce varieties that are extremely cold hardy and ones that aren't really frost tolerant at all. If you are confused about how to grow lettuce and you want to learn more, I will link to a video both above and down in the video description that teaches you everything you need to know about growing different types of lettuce. Now, your lettuces, like your romaines, generally speaking, they are not even frost tolerant. A light frost can damage them. And a lot of your green lettuces, they are going to be tolerant to somewhere around the low to mid 20s. But your red leaf lettuces are going to be the king of cold hardiness, especially ones that are very ruffled. They tend to be the most cold hardy. And I have proven these lettuce varieties to be cold hardy down to 15 to 20 degrees uncovered out in my garden. These varieties are New Red Fire, red sails, rouge d'Ivre, and marvel of 4 seasons. Now, the reason why I included lettuces on this list is because most of the stuff here, these are roots and greens that you are going to have to stew or braise or saute. Sometimes you just want a nice, fresh, crisp salad, and that is where your winter lettuces come into play. Now, your red lettuces, generally speaking, are quite nutrient dense. On average, a 100-gram serving will give you about 16 calories, and they are also rich in protein, vitamin A, iron, calcium, and potassium. Some of your best red lettuces can be up to 33% protein per gram. Again, you're going to have to eat a bathtub full for it to add up to a lot of grams of protein, but again, very impressive macronutrient profile for you to be able to harvest fresh food throughout the winter. You know, it's funny. In the modern world we live in many ways, food has become so abundant that the problem is too many calories. We are actually looking for lower calorie density things in order to control our calorie intake and keep our weights managed. But when we are talking about survival gardening, actually growing things out in our garden and trying to become less dependent on grocery stores and more self-sufficient, we actually need to grow the high-calorie stuff. If we have to rely on only eating cold hardy greens throughout the winter, we're not going to survive. There's just not enough energy there. So that's why I included so many different roots and tubers in this list, because these things contain calories. We can actually eat enough of them to keep our bellies full and our energy levels high, and that is what is critically important. Many of you have very cold winters where you're not going to be able to grow everything you need to survive throughout the winter, and that's fine. Just maximize your harvest during the warmer growing season. Be sure to store your potatoes, sweet potatoes, onions, and winter squashes. They will keep all winter long when stored properly in a cool, dry place. Make sure that you process your summer fruits and vegetables into salsas, jams, jellies, pickles, and tomato puree. Process them in mason jars, and they can be stored up to 1 year. Buy some large sacks of rice and beans and store them in a cool, dry place. Rice and beans can store for years. When you combine all of these things, stored vegetables, canned foods, dried beans, dried grains, and what you're actively growing out in your garden throughout the winter, you truly can be self-sufficient and food secure in the winter. Just get yourself a chest freezer for some meat storage, store some water just in case, and you are pretty much all set. Remember, the goal here isn't necessarily to grow 100% of everything and survive off of that. Most of us don't have the backyard size or the time to do that. The goal is to just be as self-reliant as possible. Cut the budget down. Spend less money in stores. You will not only have a heavier wallet, but you'll probably be healthier for it physically, and it's just really rewarding to do this. So everybody, I sure hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and please ring that notification bell so you're notified when I release more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the seeds that I featured in this video, I will place some links down in the video description so you can get those exact seeds. If you're curious about anything I use out in my garden to grow food year-round, I will place a link to my Amazon storefront down in the video description, which contains everything I use in real life to grow food. So expand the video description, click on the Amazon link, you'll see everything I use in real life, and while you're down there, please check out my spread shop for custom merch if you want to support the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video. Dale, holy smokes, buddy. That scared me. I did not see that gator over there at all. He is like totally camouflaged. We got to be a little bit careful when we go by Mr. or Mrs. Gator over there. They're not all that big of a gator, but I was not expecting to see that. Not a very big gator, but still a gator nonetheless. Wow, very pretty. What do you think, Dale? Maybe 4 to 5 feet long? All right, bud. Let's stay over here and let's keep going. Yeah. That's a nice little North Carolina gator right there. Hey, buddy.